Mike's on.
All right, welcome everybody to the September 2025 Manhattan Community Board 1 Land Use, Zoning and Economic Development Committee. We have a relatively short-ish agenda, but we have a very important and key item at the top of our agenda, which is a presentation from the Department of City Planning on the Manhattan Plan, which is on for a resolution. Invite our friends from DCP up to give us the presentation. And everyone just, I know we know everybody, but maybe just for the record, identify yourself when we started. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Gravel. I'm in our strategic planning division at City Planning and part of the team that's managing the Manhattan Plan. Pleasure to be here.
John Manton from Housing Division. Good to see all of you again. Good to see you, John.
Matt Gutierrez, planner for CB1.
Welcome back as always.
Is there a short presentation that we could?
Yes.
This is very similar to a presentation we shared back in May for community board leader for all of the community boards for the leadership of community boards. So, but if you were not at that meeting, probably there was only one representative of CB1. So I think it's worth sharing it with this audience to get an opportunity to get feedback. And then I know we've had some great conversations with Tammy about, what you see, what's going on in your community board and some questions you had. So we're happy to try to answer the questions that you have and talk a little bit more about how Community Board 1 can help them participate in this process. If the State of the City addressed, the mayor announced Manhattan Plan. This is a little bit different from how you might normally be used to engaging with us, in that it's not a neighborhood plan, it's not a ULURP application, but it's an ideas generating process to think about strategies and ideas for getting more housing in the borough. So it's a borough-wide plan. And specifically thinking about how can we think ambitiously? So the mayor said, how can you do something as much as 100,000 new homes in the borough over the next decade? And what it really is an engagement. It's beginning as an engagement process. We'll talk a little bit more about what that's going to look like in a minute, but we really are trying to hear ideas from stakeholders, including stakeholders at our community plans. And it's inclusive of not only zonings, but also thinking about policy changes, regulatory tools, and even out of the box ideas or things that the city used to do or the state used to do that maybe we should think about doing again. Talk about Michelama and those sorts of more ambitious efforts. So we've been hearing a lot of ideas like that. If I can get this to work here.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to hear. We just double check something. Sure. Ellen, can you for a second? I will give more.
It's not a lot of slides, so.
Your guy.
Shouldn't be too.
Got a lot of
much.
slides.
Yeah.
Very nice. What nice intro.
So we were thinking, really, the way we've been thinking about this is where do we need to grow? Why do we need to grow? So I think there's a question. So why are we talking about Manhattan? Why are we talking about now? Where should we be growing and how should we grow? It's not only the two is about, but not only thinking about geographically where we have, how should we do? Next slide, please. So why Manhattan? I think for the many of you who already live in Manhattan, it probably makes why you live here makes a lot of sense. I think you and a lot of other people have unparalleled access to jobs, excellent public transit, excellent amenities. And for a lot of New York's history, it's been a place where people could rent an apartment and start their journey. But as we all know, this is increasingly getting slipping out of reach for too many people. And part of the problem, we not the entire problem, is that housing production has not kept up. There's just simply not enough housing for all the people that need it. And it's becoming incredibly more expensive. Next slide, please. So there was a point when Manhattan really led the city in housing production. But we have seen in more recent years that Manhattan's share in the production has fallen off as it has picked up in other boroughs. So in more recent numbers, only Staten Island produced less housing, over the 5-year period between 2021 and 2024, produced less housing. So only 14% of new units, in 2024 were built in the borough. Next slide, please. We've also seen that the production is uneven. So if you look at the over the last 10 years, if you look at the housing production in neighborhoods, we saw that the production has been pretty uneven. Community Board One's actually produced a lot of housing, as you all know. A lot of that has been through sort of post 9/11 conversion activity. But we have seen neighborhoods like the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side actually lose housing. Some of that is due to a combination of units and a number of other factors. So believe it or not, there are places where you can lose housing. Next, please, yeah. We don't need to belabor this, it's gotten very expensive. Yeah, okay. Next, no one's gonna dispute that. What we have also seen, a lot of the sort of rezonings and neighborhood plans that have happened in the city, in more recent years. There has not been as much of it in Manhattan. In 2016, the city created mandatory inclusionary housing, which is a policy that when we increase density for housing, we have to require a certain amount of that housing to be affordable and permanently affordable. There have been fewer opportunities to do that in Manhattan because we have done fewer rezonings. You can see we've done none in Community Board One. So that is one of the tools. A lot of the opportunities now are on privately owned sites, and tools like mandatory inclusionary housing are how we can maximize affordable housing production. To bring new units on. So where should we go? That's a question we've been asking in this process, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we've been asking and who we've been talking to. So these are just some examples of the kinds of things that we've been hearing, but we've heard also lots of great ideas, but things like, are there specific sites that people are aware of that look like a good opportunity for housing, and wondering like, why has it never gotten developed? Are there particular blocks or corridors or neighborhoods that people see as good opportunities for housing because they haven't produced as much despite having some opportunity, despite being near transit? We've heard a lot of suggestions about we should be focusing on transit-oriented development. We should be focusing on those neighborhoods that haven't been producing yet. We're hearing lots of ideas. Maybe we should look into what institutions are doing, if there are opportunities on our campuses. And maybe we should be looking at where zoning is perhaps overly restrictive with regard to. Next slide, please. So some examples of restrictive zoning in action. We have rules in Hudson Yards. When that plan was put together, it was really envisioned as a premier commercial district for the city. As we all know, things have changed a little bit post-COVID. Some of the rules in there are rules in Hudson Yards on some sites that allow 33 FAR, which is, I think everyone here knows what FAR means, but the density for commercial uses is significantly higher than for residential. So there might be an opportunity there to think about, well, maybe we should rethink, how heavy we're putting the thumb on the scale for commercial and allow for more residential in place of Hudson Yards. Another example is along 125th Street. There's a lot of sites right near transit. They're vacant. We have some rules there that make it very difficult to build. Maybe we should be revisiting those. They're prime. Midtown South, as you all know, the city recently adopted zoning in the area south of Midtown in the Garment District. This was an area that didn't allow housing, so manufacturing zone. We changed the rules to allow for some development, allow for conversion of office buildings, to bring thousands of units online. Those are some of the ideas that we think there are other places where we could do something similar. Next slide, please. And then how we should go. Next slide, please. So we're not just focused on zoning tools and specific sites. We also want to think about, are there policies or regulations that we should be looking at? Are there things that in regard to, processes at HPD and affordable units, that we to make it easier to build affordable units, to make them easier to get tenanted. Or the things related to tax code or insurance. I mean, these are all the kinds of ideas we're hearing people suggest to make it zoning pencil out, making it quicker to build the housing so that we aren't putting up unnecessary obstacles in the way of getting housing and getting more affordable housing in particular. Next slide, please. And a little bit about the timeline. So we began this process by looking at some of the work that's already been done. Community Board 4 has a plan, a housing plan that they put out. The borough president has a housing plan, which we looked at closely, as well as 197A plans and past plans and projects that are really think are relevant. And then we just really spent the summer talking to people and trying and surveying people to try to get understand what some ideas that we hadn't thought of ourselves. Community boards, we've been doing stakeholder groups, focus groups. We have an online survey. I'll talk a little bit about more in a minute. We have wrapped up the pop-ups and tabling events. We did those in the summer. They were good. I think we probably thousands of people we ended up interacting with at those. Thousands, probably. We did one in every borough, in every community district. I think
We were told 700.
that's the
Like,
survey.
round a survey.
Survey results, yeah. And these are interactions, the people who sort of have direct communications. Next slide, please.
Oopsie. Tell us what my thought process was. It go away.
So this, when we spoke with the community boards back in May, we haven't launched the website yet. It was launched, I believe, in sort of early June. So a lot of our engagement has also been in digital engagement as well. So we were doing sort of, not only are we out in neighborhoods at pop-up tables and in stakeholder, inviting people to focus group conversations. We're also inviting people to engage digitally. There is a survey. It still will be right at least through the end of this month. I would say we did look at the numbers for community board one. They're not as high as we'd like, so we'd love your help getting it out here in this last sort of push. We need help.
What's your deadline?
I think we're gonna leave it up through, at least through the end of the month.
September 30th.
Yes. Yeah, so that would be great. We have done social media push. We currently still have advertising on the link kiosks in the city, which we're hoping to sort of raise awareness of the plan and draw people to the survey. I think we're at probably between 750 and 800 survey responses at this point. Our goal was 1,000. There's going to be another social media push coming here soon to sort of before sort of the last couple weeks of the survey, a few weeks before the survey closes. We're optimistic that we'll hit that goal. So next slide, we can get a little preview of what the survey looks like on the website. So if you go on the website and we can share some, if you like, we can share some flyer with you to post to make it easier to.
We'd love to, and we have a lovely student from a local school in Manhattan.
Yeah.
So we would love to have
Yeah,
information and we would share out.
of course. So the survey is available in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Chinese. It not only invites people to share ideas, but also try to understand what their experience with housing has been, where they live and what they like about their current neighborhood, what kind of trade-offs they have made, if they have been thinking about leaving their neighborhood or the city because of the cost of housing. And these are sort of, we want to understand. We don't want to just get ideas about where and how we should build, but how people feel about housing and what their experience has been. So the survey really goes a little deeper in that regard. Next slide, please. Sit up. Yeah, so questions. I know we have a number of.
Jason,
Do I have
I
a
have a question.
So I would love to, I don't know exactly what it could be, but regulatory changes would be amazing, just at the very like basic level, like some of these things, whatever goes on, I do so much of the DOB and
Yeah.
like, maybe you could send that questionnaire out to all the license registrations at DOB, stuff like all the
Okay.
people that are like professionals, like that
Yeah.
have licenses, that are like studied people and hear from them. I wouldn't get that because I'm just a schmo, but.
Like architects and
You know,
expediters.
Alice would get it and then tell me about it. And, though, that would be a great place to tap for that, like, little niche, I think.
I think that's a great idea. I mean,
Yeah.
because obviously we work through professional associations,
Yeah.
like the usual folks, like the AIA and things like that. But there are these like more workaday folks who you might not reach through the
Right.
fancy
And
organizations.
there's been big changes at like DOB, like I'm around so long, we used to like fax stuff in, but now you like do it 24/7 online. That's how it's done. There's no
Yeah.
more touch. For me, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I think maybe some people got knocked out of the business from that, people that couldn't make that transition. And make, so like, it'd just be good. It's a good, you can get from contractors to, we often hear from the developers, right? Let's try to hear from those guys that are registered through some of those things.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
It works for stuff. Allison, Mike.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I'm still confused about the relationship of this plan and the Manhattan Borough President's plan that started years ago and seems to have had very similar amounts of research, I'm sure some amount of money. There were an identification of over 150 sites. We spent a lot of time with that. Why this plan? Why does this exist as compared to that one?
I mean, we're in corporate, we haven't, one of the stakeholders we've been talking to is the Manhattan Borough President, and we've like folded those ideas into the plan.
What's the difference between them though? If he was looking at every site in
Yeah.
Manhattan to identify places for more housing in 23, why in 25 does the mayor
Yeah.
feel he has to do it again? And have you, DCP,
Yeah.
I assume involved in both processes?
I don't know how closely were we involved. I don't think we were involved really in the Manhattan Borough President's plan. I don't, perhaps the Manhattan office was. I don't believe we were. I mean, I think this builds on that. And it's from the administration opposed to the borough president. I think the scope is a bit bigger and that it's also sort of thinking about some more regulatory changes and I think probably a bigger engagement effort, but I do think they're very complementary.
Yeah, broader and deeper. We love the Manhattan Borough President and his staff. But it's a pretty small, they're great, but it's, as you're in the building, it's a pretty small group of folks. And so, taking that spirit with a much broader, armada of agencies and staff at city planning and the ability to do months and months of outreach already and into the future, I feel like that kind of takes the ball and really runs with it.
Okay, so that's an important difference in
Yeah.
terms of the number of people working on it. How does it work with the city of Yes in terms of that was your department, of course, and the relationship of this plan to the city of Yes and all of the regulatory changes that were being reviewed and
You wanna take that one, John?
Yeah, and I'll see if you have anything to add there. I mean, I think this is very much in that spirit. And as I think I probably talked about when we were here, we always saw City of Yes, these incremental changes across, the full city as very complementary with like bigger changes within narrower geographies. I was referring to things like neighborhood studies when I, was saying that when I was here before, where, stakeholders go site by site in a given neighborhood and sort of plan for a new future for a neighborhood often in a way that City of Yes wasn't intended to do. Looking at a borough is like in between those scales, I would say, where, we do have, we're geared up for an amount of time and an outreach and stakeholder engagement effort that can look at bigger changes than anything that we, proposed in any one area for City of Yes. But that, have the ability to be consequential within that same spirit. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's sort of two sides of that coin. In some ways bigger, but in some ways like more technical and more focused on what sort of is needed in Manhattan and Manhattan neighborhoods, where I think the City of Yes changes were really sort of more broad sweeping what makes sense on the citywide level. We're looking more at what makes sense Manhattan level, what makes sense in Manhattan neighborhood, some of the ideas that we're soliciting and hopefully, elevating in this.
If I have two more questions, if I may, unless you want to interject
I
others.
just wanted to sort of
Yeah.
interject on that.
Yeah.
Question, like, at what point then do you, let me ask it this way, is it contemplated that eventually the plan would then get a little bit more granular than just a borough level? Because obviously not all neighborhoods are created equal. Density in the financial district is much different than some places in Midtown.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so I would say the plan, it's not gonna be an implementation plan. It will outline several strategies. People talk about strategies that have been raised through this engagement process. And will include some ideas that will be very specific and extremely technical. I think we will talk about a lot of the ideas that have come up. We're not gonna, point to a particular neighborhood or a particular site and say, we're gonna do this thing and we're gonna advance it, but we're gonna say, here's an example of a neighborhood where there are opportunities. We've identified, transit or lots of sites available, not a lot of housing production in recent years. We need. We might identify, we might see, we'll identify 50 vacant lots, and here's sort of what the characteristics of the lots and why we think they might be vacant. There's some, possible things we could do to help get them redeveloped. And does that help?
Yeah, I guess I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
when you're getting regulations for this, that, that you stay conscious of the fact that maybe it's the unintended consequences that I'm thinking of, or it's something that's great for some Upper East Side neighborhood that needs exactly recurrent, but it doesn't need to be in the financial district or some
Yeah.
crushed and not necessarily all the infrastructure. That's bad.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Sorry about that, just lost my train of thought. No. I guess, this is maybe a too granular point, but we often are hearing and seeing a lot about demolition, matter of fact, as a sort of way to go about this planning for your mass, and particularly in night shift, right? That's become a real moment of truth. Does the department take some sort of perspective here in terms of adaptive reuse? I mean, we get hearing a lot about this in terms of, some sort of alleged tipping of the hat to environmental concerns.
Yeah.
We never see it. And in fact, we see the opposite. We see so many buildings that come down and that are being rebuilt. And I just wondered if there's some consciousness about that in this plan.
I mean, the city of Yes, and the example that John gave, that was in the presentation on Midtown South mixed use are really about adaptive reuse strategies. City of Yes did change rules to make it much easier to convert residential buildings to residential use, much easier. So I think we've already have continued to do that and are thinking about more opportunities. Now, that said, it's also important that Manhattan continues to be the city and the region's job center. So, I think there is a balance there that we need to strike, and as planners, we do have to think about, we can't convert every office building, and not every office building can be practically converted. I think there are real sort of architectural and physical constraints to that. But it's certainly part of it. I think there's a limit to how much that can accomplish. So I think we do have to think about some redevelopment strategies, but I think we're always trying to think about ways to do that in a way that, minimizes displacement, minimizes impact on neighborhoods. And so you think things like 1 or 2 story retail buildings that could be redeveloped, retail replaced on the ground floor.
I think conversions have been a big early success story
Yeah.
for housing opportunity. I remember sitting here talking to you guys about this new tax benefit we were arguing for 467M at the state level that would, for the first time, get permanently affordable housing as part of conversions. And you guys, CD1 has or will have shortly, I think like 600-700 units of permanently affordable housing around like 25 Water and 55 Broad and 77 Water and 222 Broadway in a way that I find really encouraging. And the conversion pipeline is actually much bigger than it had been in decades past. So I think we really have, in response to your point, made it more possible to convert these underused non-residential buildings than it had been prior to housing opportunity. We're seeing results already on that front.
Absolutely. The one that concerns me is more the preservation discussion. In other words, this sort of desire to wipe out like Elliott Fulton houses and build new. This is very controversial and for good reason. And I find there's often the excuse, well, we couldn't, it's too expensive to whatever, or Carmine Street in the village, right? And the recreation center, that whole debate. I think those things really need to be teased out in a way when this plan comes forward, that we really work with landmarks and I suppose with DOT, in all the nuance, like at the neighborhood level of what that really means in terms of what are we losing and what are we gaining, and with data. Like sometimes I feel like it has to come down. Well, it doesn't have to come down. The engineers come in on the other side, you say it doesn't have to come down. It's here. There has to be proof of that. There has to, the public has to appreciate why it has to be. Housing is going to pay 100 units and
Yeah.
let that building go. But there has to be more to that. And so I hope that that gets well reviewed in the, whatever this becomes.
So I'm saying you're like articulating the trade-offs there. Like
Totally, absolutely. And not hiding from the fact that at Carmine Street, maybe it's a better bet, because you're getting more of something
Yeah.
or recreation. And maybe it's not, but letting the public in on that.
You're right. More, that's good.
Michael, and then Richard, Laura.
The first question is about vacant lots. And why is the owner incentivized to keep it vacant rather than to build something on it? And the real estate property taxes are very low on a vacant lot versus, what you're gonna get once you build something.
Mhm.
So is that a DOF problem? Is that a city planning problem? But, they're not building more land.
Yeah.
They've got vacant land and they're not building.
I mean, there could be a number of reasons why. It could be a taxing, it could be that maybe the taxes or property tax formulas are out of whack. You're not, there's not enough of an incentive. In most places you wonder if how it really happened. Some cases it might be zoning. Some cases it may be an ownership dispute. It could be, in some places, there's historic contamination. I mean,
The
there.
bottom line is there's no housing
But
being
this,
produced.
yeah, this is an
Yeah.
insight, it goes back to the 1970s. The original purpose of 421A way many generations ago was to address that issue. What if we enabled you to keep your low taxes even if you built housing on your land? That was the insight behind 421A. And it's morphed over the decades into something more like an affordable housing program, like a mixed income development building. But that's still one of the fundamental purposes of 421A. Let's not, jack people's taxes up just because they want to do something with their land. Now, going beyond that, some people advocate for let's, tax vacant lots like punitively to make it unremunerative to leave a lot vacant. Those ideas are floating around. That would be a state law issue. They would have to take that step in order to change the taxes that apply to vacant lots. But it's an idea that's out there. It's one that's been implemented in other places, so it's a.
Yeah, and it's also a climate change issue as well. All right, so the same question about stalled projects.
Yeah,
What can you do about that?
yeah.
Is there a special unit that's working on that? And
Yeah.
you take it away from the developer when his tower leans by 3 inches?
Yeah.
Because nobody's gonna live there until you do something.
Yeah. Yeah, we've heard that, some other community boards have asked that question as well. So-
Yeah, we monitor them, but city planning at least lacks the authority to do anything to force people to get going, but yeah, I definitely see, this is like the community district where that issue's front and center.
It's pretty
Okay,
obvious.
buildings like that or more than 4? The tall one. No, there's one in Tribeca. There's the one, the old mosque site, or I call it that, it was the.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
45.
I mean, that's older.
All right. My next question is, why are family-style units underemphasized?
I think it's a market challenge.
Well, that's the
yeah.
problem.
Yeah, we hear that a lot,
If
yeah.
you have 2 children, you want 2 bedrooms. You have 3 children, you want 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
You have 3 bedrooms, then the one who has 2 bedrooms will move into the 3 bedroom. You have some mobility.
Yeah.
What you need here is you need some And then, the widow who has been in the 3 bedroom forever, really, might live very nicely in a 1 bedroom. But you don't have that mobility.
Yeah.
And it's not built in any way, shape or form.
No, housing mix is hugely important. It's something that we've been emphasizing for a long time now. Like working with our population division, the folks who do the census, one of the ironies of the situation is that the most undersupplied units in New York City and Manhattan in particular are smaller units. Actually, there are millions of people who want to live alone but can't. And so you see all over the city, people are so used to like teaming up with people they don't even know as roommates and like renting out 2 and 3 bedroom apartments that in times past may have housed families. And so while at the same time encouraging the development of family sized units, we also want to, create a bunch of smaller units too, so people who don't want to live together have that opportunity as well. But another
But I
very
mean,
good
485, for example, speaks not at all of family-sized units. That's a sample. It's always just the income level that's being attacked.
Yeah, with our zoning programs, we include bedroom mix requirements where, at least 50% have to be 2 bedroom or more, 75% have to be 1 bedroom or more, so that you don't get a ton of studios. So we agree with you on that front. We don't regulate market units, but we do regulate,
But the ability to live in an affordable unit shouldn't just be based upon income. Maybe city workers need to be living in Manhattan, as an example. Maybe that's a separate category that should be favored here, because it's in everybody's interest for the policeman to live in the neighborhood that he's policing, as an example. So I don't know if that's ever been brought up, but city workers should be treated nicely, and they're not. Then I have a question about retail, and can retail become residential? We have so many empty storefronts,
Yep.
whatever,
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
these are, we're hearing a lot of, we're echoing a lot of what we're hearing in the survey and the conversations we're having, bedroom mix, and we're going to do something with vacant retail. And we have zoning in some places that requires retail. Maybe we should think about whether it still makes sense, I think.
And my final
Was it
question,
time it made sense? It may make.
is about air rights transfers.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, they go out, they find air rights 4 blocks away, and then they pile it on top of a vacant lot. But they're not creating affordable units. They have more height, therefore they have more luxury units to sell. What's the point there?
I would say generally, if you're referring to transferable development rights programs, which, were pioneered here in Community District 1 with the South Street Seaport transfer.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Actually.
No, of course, I know you are. I was just referencing that it was pioneered here. Typically, they're created for some specific purpose, whether it's preserving South Street Seaport in its low-density form, generating revenue to pay the mortgage so that the city didn't default on those and those didn't get demolished. Landmark transfers are for a similar purpose because we restrict the ability of landmark owners to use development rights on their sites. In order to avoid legal challenges, we gave them the ability to transfer those to other sites to recoup the revenue that they might otherwise be able to generate by redeveloping their sites. In other situations, it's to preserve open space, but typically there's some planning purpose other than affordable housing behind that the revenue is intended
But
for.
That's my point,
So
you want to create, so, why doesn't that become a 60-40 or something?
I mean, the reason for that is if you created the TDR mechanism to compensate the landmark owner, then we have to be careful about clawing all that revenue back for ourselves for affordable housing. And so, the public benefit that emerges from the landmark transfer or the South Street Seaport transfer is the preservation of a landmark or it's the South Street Seaport. And so I'd be hesitant. We have to be careful when we're designing these programs not to get too grabby for other public benefits as well.
But when you sell the air rights to the Seaport for $100 a square foot, and where the developer is going to get $2,000 a square foot, what's the benefit to the city?
Well, those development rights are They were purchased and put in a bank many decades ago. I take your point, but typically if we were to have affordability requirements along with it, it would devalue those rights in a way that, you know, could work against the purpose of those mechanisms in the first place, which was to create revenue for landmarks and preservation purposes or for open space.
But it's not how it's being used.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm making.
That's a good point.
Okay, Richard? If you can unmute yourself.
You should be able to.
All right, sorry. I have a couple of questions too. Excuse me, there we are. All right. Am I unmuted yet?
You're good to go.
Good.
Good, thanks. So I have a couple of questions, one of which is kind of a follow-on to what Michael is talking about in affordability. But the first question has to do with the plan itself. Maybe I'm missing it or missed it, but I don't. Could you please help us understand how this plan will be used, how it will be rolled out? Are there mandatory elements to this plan? Will there be a review cycle for various proposals? What will the community board participation be going forward? It's not very clear at all what will happen when you have all of this input and you put it back out.
Yeah, that's a good question. As I said in the beginning, it's a little different from a typical plans we do. It is the idea, it is an ideas generating process, so it will be a compendium of ideas. We hope good ideas. It will be as a potential, it's not an implementation plan, but they are things that we think that can potentially set us up for identifying a work program in the next term or even next administration. I think that will really, depend on who's in leadership positions in January. But the idea is, we have done a pretty, we think will be a very robust engagement process to try to think really big tent about how we can address some really sticky problems. And some of these ideas really require a lot of study and a lot of vetting, some of which we will be able to do in this plan. Others will identify a need for really further work, maybe setting up a work program for city planning for a number of years to come. But I think really to be determined, how much of that will be sort of taken and implemented by elected officials, by our leaders in our agency. And then some of it may not even be ideas that we can do. They might be ideas for the state. There may be a legislative agenda for the state. There might be ideas for Department of Buildings. There may be ideas for the private sector.
Do you see this plan as organic, as evolutionary? Do you see this as evolving with some sort of dynamic give and take with communities? Or are you just going to be putting it out there and it'll be on the shelf?
Yeah, I think we don't know right now. I mean, we were asked to produce a Manhattan plan by the end of the year. If there become multiple versions of a Manhattan plan, I mean, we hope to get feedback on some of the ideas before we publish. To be determined now whether there be future iterations of it. I mean, we are for right now planning on doing one version of it.
But I would say it's a real luxury
Yeah.
to be able to be talking to you now, before, there's a specific set of proposals that you have to deal with as they hurtle through ULURP or something like that. It's part of conversations that are background and that will inform whatever emerges from them. So it's just good to be having these conversations at this stage rather than, 2 months before a final vote or something like that.
You mentioned a vote. How does a vote play in here?
Sorry, there's no vote here. I was just drawing a contrast between
Oh.
when I was here, with you before, it was in the middle of a public review process that was heading towards a vote. This could be a more
Understood.
open-ended conversation.
We're not on the clock.
Yeah.
Understood. Well, this is, I guess this next question or comment is part of your input process, but I just want to make it in any case. I look at the housing production by neighborhood, and Lower Manhattan, which I'm taking, though the streets aren't identified, is dark blue, over 5,000 units.
Give me one
Among
sec, Richard. We're about to share that information with people. Okay, there we go. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I
I mean,
think
I'm
these
looking
are-
at the map, and the map shows Lower Manhattan in dark blue, and with over 5,000 units between 2015 and 2024, the highest level shown on the map. And yet we know that rents in Lower Manhattan have far from come down. On the contrary, they have soared. I forget the exact numbers, but perhaps doubled or more than doubled in that period of time. And so clearly for us in Lower Manhattan, simply development is failing the need for affordability. And so we have to make sure somehow it has to be clear that the housing produced, at least in the area where we live and perhaps other dense areas in Manhattan, cannot be the kind of development that has taken place over these last 10 years, which has simply driven rents up, displacement out, and then a near impossibility to stay here for certainly average working people. So I don't know how.
Those are great points, Richard. And I think that CD1 is like a little unusual in that it does have high production, but it doesn't have a ton of new affordable. And I think that's because of your conversions pipeline that you've seen here, where you've got all these conversions, but we've never had tools before to get affordable housing along with conversions. And like I said, now with 467M, we're seeing that changing. So you do have a pretty significant conversions pipeline, but we're seeing permanently affordable housing along with it.
But it-
But to your second
Michael,
point,
Michael, let me, Michael,
to continue with your second point though, is when we're talking about the housing shortage and the need for housing production in order to address skyrocketing rents, housing markets aren't just in a community district. Housing markets are regional. And so while you guys, Community District 1, have been doing a good job in certain respects producing housing through those conversions, look at that map, go north a little bit to Upper East or Upper West, go to Community District 2, we have not been seeing much housing production at all in many parts of Manhattan. The same holds for the rest of the city. And so this effort, as the citywide effort was as well, they're all part of an attempt to enable more housing production on a citywide. I wish we had control over the regional level, but on a citywide level, in order to address those issues that you're talking about. The symptoms that you feel in Community District 1 are not simply because of things that happen in Community District 1. It's about things that are happening, or rather not happening, in other parts of the city as well.
And
I just want to add to that it's not just conversions, which I'm happy to hear will generate some affordable housing when we were afraid where they had not been before, but it's also new development, because the new development
Yes.
in Lower Manhattan has been nothing but luxury high rise that do zero, in fact, not zero, they're really negative as far as affordability. And negative as far as use of space, because so much of the luxury buildings that are here remain dark at night. Large percentages of those apartments, while they've been built, they do not house people. And so
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
Those are great points, Richard. I'm very happy at this point in history to be able to talk about some of the conversions with permanently affordable housing that are coming along. Some of the tools we rolled out for housing opportunity as well are intended to do the same thing for new development. It's just that those are a little farther back in the pipeline right now. I know it's not Community District 1, but just today, I was absolutely delighted to see 3 new mandatory inclusionary housing applications for new permanently affordable housing just north of you guys in Community District 2. 2 100% affordable buildings and 1 mixed income building that represent, the fruits of some of our previous efforts. And so I hope if I'm here next year or whatever, that I'll be able to talk about some of those victories with respect to new development as well, but I absolutely hear you.
Before Laura goes, I'm gonna recognize Sandy.
So I appreciate where you're going on this. I just want to highlight, I would ask that when you come and you talk about housing and you tout the 500 units, that it's done in context. And I don't mean this as a shade, but the problem that is not talked about is 500 units. That's great. That's out of potentially 2,500 units that are built. So it's 2,000 that are market rate and 500 that are affordable, nothing for anything in between. And what we see in Lower Manhattan, we have the stats and you can see them. We've built since 2014 and 15 or 20 years, over 5,000 units. And this is since 2014, affordable has been 299. So we are the example of, if you build housing, you don't lower the average rate. It does not bring down, building more market rate housing does not actually lower. And part of it is the illusion for what the comparisons are, right? When you're looking at housing, because we have the numbers here, when you're looking at a comparison, what Richard's talking about for dark is the pied-à-terres, right? Pied-à-terres, so if you're building tons of market rate housing, the reason why you're not able to lower it is there's no real live market demand for people who are living here. If people are buying it as a second home or renting it as a second home, or they live in the suburbs, they work in the city and they have it as their place Monday through Thursday, kind of a thing. Those things limit the diversity of housing and artificially change the market. I would love to see in your concepts something that adjusts for that, because we have no adjustments. Right now, every program that is out there in New York City builds a have and have not city. So it's a 70-30 and 80-20 with the lowest end, because we do need to house people who have troubles in the income bands. But guess what? We have troubles in the income bands in middle class as well. And there is no either state or city program. If you look at state of Connecticut, our neighbors to the north did a Build for Connecticut. It is specifically a incentive program for development for below market rate housing for middle income. So it bridges the gap in between. That's never been done around here, and that maybe could stem the tide of a full market luxury housing and be able to get people here to stay for middle income, right? Middle income housing tax credits.
That's
Why aren't we talking about?
Incredibly good point. I see the affordable housing numbers in CD1, and I get excited that the 500 units are what is completed, and then there's another 400 in the under construction right now. That's like, it just itself right now, 3 times more than we've seen in the last 10 years. So I'm excited about the affordable housing. Middle income, I completely agree with you. And we would love to hear your voice loud and clear, like we've heard voices from Community District 4 as well, really advocate for middle income housing. I would say that, having been involved in these debates for over 10 years now, everybody just wants the low AMIs. I know that there are a few other folks.
We have argued this many times.
Politically, it's like really, there's not a lot of space, when you come out with a proposal that says like, and here's like 120% AMI or whatever, like, people tend not to like that, so I would welcome your voice on that point, along with some of your colleagues on other community boards in Manhattan, because I couldn't agree more.
And then one of the other questions is, and I know it's a terrible topic because it's considered not business friendly, but some form of figuring out a way to stabilize neighborhoods. That's what we did after 9/11. There was a lot of stabilization in the area, which led to 3 brand new schools being built, another one being expanded, and it kept families here. But when you have the ability to do a 30% rent increase, where you've given somebody, you've given attracted a family to the neighborhood, and then you give them a 30% rent increase, there's no way to retain those people in the neighborhood. You can't build community. The markets don't actually react to the local marketplace because it's an 80-20. If people are gonna pay $1 for an orange, they're gonna pay $1 for an orange. If an orange in Chinatown is 30 cents, there's a reason. It's because they have a greater density of lower income people. Building 80-20 is not helping the people who are in the 20 side be able to actually afford groceries, anything else here. So, well, then maybe they buy them online. Great, but that doesn't help the local stores. And that adds to more congestion on the streets. So until we get back to what we had done for Lower Manhattan after 9/11 was built a diversity of housing, low, middle, and market, and stabilize it, we will never make the progress that we need because we are the example down here. 5,000 units of new housing, market rate, 2,000 units coming online from just the units that you described, right? With 500 affordable, but 2,000 are market. And if even 20% of those end up being pied-à-terres, it's not moving our dial. So figuring out a way to handle the pied-à-terres, and I don't, nobody wants to hear more taxes, nobody wants to hear more fees, but maybe it's incentives for actually voting and living here, I don't know. But finding some way through a program to incentivize, like they do in other states, for below market rate housing for all levels is really important.
No, those are great points. The issues that families face in Community District 1, they can't be addressed through efforts in CD1 alone. And I assure you that when we're talking about borough-wide efforts or citywide efforts, that those aren't intended to be complements, and in some ways even more important than the stuff that we can do in this particular neighborhood. But
Even MIH is 2030. So if everything in Manhattan was built for 80-20, you're building a city that is have and have nots. You're not actually stabilizing the middle, which is the part that lives, works, shops, and.
No, I got you. There's a gap there. There's a gap in affordable housing policies that emerges from the politics of the issue over the last 15 plus years. I
If you
agree.
want Manhattan to be a place for everybody, then you have to figure out programs for everyone.
I think that is incredibly good feedback for the plan, because I think that even folks who work for the city have been trained over the years just to assume that literally everybody just wants you to hit the lowest AMI as possible. And, sometimes we need voices like Community District 1, like Community District 4 to remind us of folks who are neither rich nor, 30% AMI.
How many teachers do we lose from the New York City education system because they can't afford to live in a reasonable commute to the schools they work in? So they move out to Westchester and Jersey, and then eventually work in schools out there because it's just that much shorter of a commute.
No, I hear you. I live in Hillman housing in Community District 3, which is like a last bastion. And some of my good friends there are teachers in Battery Park, actually. So, it's like they're lucky. They have a foothold within a reasonable distance, but absolutely they talk about the issues that their colleagues face all the time.
I do want to add to Tammy's point, I think, really terrific, and important. one of the things I always find when we look over these plans to be, we're told 40% AMI, but nobody generally knows what that means. And so I always think to myself, why plans should really incorporate some sort of adjustable number, 2025, that's 75,000, because to her point, I'm not so sure, affordability isn't in the lowest range for many middle-class people when you're talking about those numbers. And so I think they're meaningless, right? And then some people challenge AMI altogether, of course, many people do, but
Yeah.
just to make that a little clearer would probably be helpful in really understanding what that means. So it's good advice.
Because quite frankly, if you're talking a family of, three, New York City, making 145,000. That's 100% AMI. 145,000, their rent burden.
Yeah.
Because their rent, at least in this district, would be no less than 60,000.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, to convert that into more concrete terms, like a 60% 2-bedroom is roughly $2,000 rent. A 30% AMI 2-bedroom is roughly $1,000 in rent. So, that's not nothing, but it's hard for families to afford even that.
And so take a look when you're doing your Manhattan plan about rent burden.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing that nobody seems to be looking at. And that has to do a lot with providing and finding a way for below market rate housing for middle income. Because beyond your 80-20, which is the top and the bottom, if 70% of your district is rent burden, that tells you that there's a problem. And Laura's next, right?
Thanks, Laura. It's okay.
Hi, these are so many good points. I have a couple of questions. So city planning, given all the market forces we've been talking about and the various policy obstacles and the density, the level of buildup of Lower Manhattan, like left to your own devices, what would you recommend?
I think we're not ready to share that at this point. We're waiting to hear what people have to say.
Yeah, I think it's been really refreshing in this process too. Like when I was here talking to you before, we were just talking zoning. This process has enabled us to talk about a much broader range of factors and enabled us to bring people into the conversation from other agencies in a way that I personally have found refreshing relative to like an entirely zoning focused conversation like before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that brings me to another question. Working in outer boroughs on resilience projects and how much housing is in the floodplain, and is your zoning going to take into consideration the need to elevate streets, elevate neighborhoods, incentivize people to go up and make it affordable to do that so that we don't lose even more the huge percentage of housing that's actually in our floodplain. And I'm saying this partly because like the alternative to addressing this through zoning and elevating housing is the Army Corps hats walling off the city, which would really be bad for everybody's, enjoyment of life and the economy and the vibrancy of the city. And I think it would be especially destructive to, some of the flood-prone outer borough areas.
Those are great points. I mean, within the not too distant past, we did zoning for coastal flood resiliency, which was a citywide effort to try to remove some of the zoning obstacles and to incentivize things like elevating your structure above the flood elevation. I know that this is a huge concern for other agencies beyond city planning as well. Like for instance, the Charter Review Commission, which is proposing questions for the ballot. This was probably the second biggest issue that they looked at, figuring out ways to make it easier to do things like elevate streets. Move forward with certain resilience projects. So these are all, incredibly important ideas that are great to hear about now, but know, that various other agencies and initiatives are looking at these things as well.
Can you comment then which parts of the ballot initiatives you think directly relate back to what we're talking about?
Oh, the resiliency question?
No, you just answered. The ballot initiatives, I thought you said.
Oh, well, I was answering Laura's question about resiliency and noting that, you know, city planning did a zoning initiative, citywide zoning initiative to address zoning issues around resiliency. And was noting the ballot initiatives, in November, approach it from another angle to try to make it much easier to do things like elevate streets as part of state of good repair work, or to, you know, approve resiliency measures or engage in flood buyouts for 1 to 4 family homeowners in areas where it's deemed unsafe to live, things like that, that there's a lot in the hopper. I mean, you may get the impression that all anybody in the city cares about is housing, but I would say that the second biggest issue is resiliency. And those are obviously related, as your question points out.
Well,
That's
and I
fine.
think, yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Laura.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think along with housing, you know, when we think of quality, I mean, we're actually really lucky to live down here in Community Board 1 because we have such great transit and it's a walkable place. You don't need a car to live here. And, you know, I'm sure that is contributing, and we have the waterfront. I'm sure that's contributing to the extreme high property values. And I think, you know, one way to think about solving the housing problem is to look at bringing some of the transit access to the underserved areas and the grocery stores and, you know, some of the other amenities that we have here to start to bring those to the less dense communities that are more upland and start to create density in those areas, right? Like along the ridgelines of Brooklyn and Queens, where they're out of harm's way.
Absolutely.
I'm just, yeah, 100%. I just want to ask to that point, how much are you involved with this plan with the other agencies like DEP on this resiliency question, mostly DOT? You know, all the quality of life issues that come up with housing are huge, right? And I just wondered how do they interface with you in some way that's effective?
Yeah, so there's an interagency working group, so they were brought in at the beginning of this process. We had a sort of midpoint check-in to talk about sort of infrastructure needs. Since we're not identifying like specific locations for redevelopment, like 100,000 units in this plan, it's not like they're going to be able to say, we need to add extra capacity in this neighborhood, but to understand generally, we're having conversations generally about what does adding 100,000 people in Manhattan mean for what we do and how would you prepare for that? And they're also sharing with us, we're pretty aware of what infrastructure investments are going on, but they're educating us on sort of their portfolio on the investments that have been made, particularly around, I think that there's coastal resiliency work. There's a lot of work investment that happened in parks in Manhattan. Where has the city invested, made generational investments or planning to make generational investments that can support that growth? And how do we think about that when we're planning as well?
Yeah, one would hope that in something that was, and I was very encouraged to read Manhattan, then you think, wow, really getting what we've always asked for, the holistic, large-scale overview plan. But it's not, then you dial it down and realize it's housing primarily. And I guess I think that the more of what you've described, the more integrated approach is really critical. And it's what's always missing for most of these plans, because it's very much sanctioned off into each department and each agency's review. So I don't know how that gets done. You know, we always remembered to support, I mean, there was always a push for Park City Planning to be in a place where that all happened, and I hope this plan can do more of that.
Yeah.
I just guess the other, so this is a comment, but the other question I have is, how many units is this plan, the 100,000 units in, is this a 10-year plan? Yeah, okay. That's great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I have one question.
Oh, I want to hear it.
Yeah, it's a good question. No, I was just wondering, first of all, I appreciate all the efforts on small, medium, different scales that's going on with housing. I was just wondering if there's like a super large scale idea that you guys have been,
City or something?
no, I've heard all
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
We asked for everybody's ideas and we got lots of ideas, some which were intriguing, some which are just, were like, I don't think that's gonna work.
Or doing battery park versions.
People said do Battery Park too, bring Mitchell Llama back. Bring him to Domain back, build in Central Park. I mean, some of these we would never do, but the other things are like, what would it take to do another Battery Park city? What it would take to bring Mitchell Llama back? So these are the sort of things when you ask like, what are we implementing? You know, these are ideas where there has to be some political will, but we're hopefully like, look, people think this is a good idea. This is not an easy problem to solve. Like building 100,000 units in 10 years is doubling what we did in the last 10 years. You have to be ambitious. So I think we hope that this is an opportunity to have that conversation and that this plan like sees that discourse.
Takes 10 years to build a vertical city.
Yeah. I mean, you know, some people say things like get rid of zoning altogether, you know, have that, and it's like, you know, and then, but we hear the opposite as well, like Manhattan's built out, don't look at Manhattan, you know, so we're hearing, we're across the spectrum. Ideas sort of, and we're hearing like very specific, very technical things that we should be doing, like, you know, change this very specific section of the building code.
And it's gonna be multiple scales.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
you guys are doing is great, but also
Yeah.
we need, what's gonna happen in 5 years is probably having more short.
The last word? Okay, thanks. I know this is on for a resolution, so, I'll ask committee members, is there, we don't have to do a resolution.
Right.
We don't have to. Just to make sure we have the room if we want.
We could do a resolution, we don't have to. If we don't, then I am going to ask every single member of the committee to ensure that they fill out the survey.
Okay, that's a very
It has
fair
to be,
deal.
it has to be a deal promise that everybody has to fill out the
I
survey.
would go one step, as chair, I would be on that of all members of the.
Well, we send out a
I'm
correspondence.
gonna send the link to today's meeting to everybody.
And the timing, you indicated there was no timing on this really.
September 3rd.
We are looking by the time end of the month.
Oh, for the
For the
service.
survey, yes.
Okay, that's.
And do you have any metrics that you can tell us about, like, how many people who you've had contact with who provided feedback are residents of New York City?
I mean, we could look, I mean, yes, we can look at that. I don't have that on top.
Are you guys capturing that data, capturing that?
Yeah.
We would love to
Yeah.
hear and see that data and specifically know, so we can use it in our outreach to encourage people from CB1 to,
Yeah,
I mean, we've had 56% residential growth
yeah.
for the two, you know, in the last 20 years. But we'd love to see more residential growth
Yeah.
or fill back in with people who live here.
I would say the far vast majority I know are from New York City. But I think I said before, we're disappointed in the number from community board, the zip codes of anyone in particular, so we would love.
No
we would
offense,
love-
you were at a farmer's market in the middle of the week, in the middle of the.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't, yeah. Yes,
What we can to
Yeah.
help.
yeah.
Great stuff.
Nobody comes here because they all
We
have.
want to win the survey. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's that.
That's young stuff.
Okay,
Just one more question. How will people's surveys, would we be able to see what we've all written? Where will these surveys be
So-
reviewed and answered?
Yeah. I mean, we're compiling, right now, I think we have something, I don't know, we said, I think it's about 750 responses, but something like 1,500 unique ideas that have come out of these surveys. I'm gonna say unique, they're all not, there are like, you know, there are some people who have the same ideas, and they're not like, but 1,500 ideas from, so when I say with 700 surveys, 1,500 ideas. We are trying to roll that up in a way that's digestible. I don't know if for just to protect people's sort of anonymity, I think we're not gonna do disclose,
Yeah.
but yeah, we are trying to figure out how to roll that up. We're wrangling, we're doing kind of a not quite midpoint, but a sort of an analysis now to kind of see where these ideas are sort of what are some themes that are coming out and what are some possible strategies that are coming out of these ideas?
That's really an important step because if we all
Yeah.
agree we don't have a resolution, then we would
Yeah.
depend on seeing whatever it was that you're gonna, or is.
Yeah, I think what we would do, just, it's also just, you don't want to sort of data dump and have people just have all this information they know what to do with. So we're trying to, these are ideas that came from from communities. These are ideas that came from stakeholders and focus groups. These are ideas that came from elected officials.
Right, or out of 10,000 people that responded, 4,500 thought X
Yeah.
would be helpful
Yeah,
to know.
that as well,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That would be really good data to be able to share at the end, because there is always, no offense intended to the folks at DCP, but there's always a lot of suspicion that the data that comes out is driven for a particular political purpose based on who is. It's not an independent think tank. I think it's not. But thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, committee members, hang on one minute, we have to do our district.
John and I are gonna create some kind of state program and see if it's
Okay.
possible.
I was giving this.
A state.
It's like more.
So
And
we.
thank you, Matthew, for your time
in
on
the city. I
the
think that-
power issues.
It's nice to see.
Yeah,
you.
you have any words about that? Thank you.
Representative
Yeah.
of middle class, lower Manhattan.
I would go and skip anywhere, anytime, anything, whatever you needed, because we don't do socioeconomically diverse housing, we do in the city. Period.
Okay, all right.
Before,
Thank you.
you guys, before we get moving on budget.
Yeah, they get to see.
An announcement. So before we get moving on budget, an announcement for the land use committee. This is Patrick's last meeting as chair of land use. He will be dropping to co-chair. We are not losing him.
Okay.
But Netta, starting next month, will be chair of land use.
Bravo, okay, well deserved.
Congratulations. You have a lot to live up to.
So we're gonna swap spots in the chairs and, we move forward.
Okay. Guess, Vicky's coming for my spot.
Don't lose his efficiency. He's one of run the best.
Okay,
All right,
Well, let's touch
Budget.
that now. Let's get to the
Keep a
budget.
tight budget. Please.
Luckily, we only have 4 items from last year's budget requests.
Amazing.
So
Yeah.
the way we've looked at this in the past is to look at our current, or I guess, look at our most recent budget requests and the responses that we got and determine, is it something we want to keep on there and somehow further flesh out? Something we want to just flat out remove? And then, of course, another option are anything new that we want to add. So why don't we take the 4 that are here now? The first item, which relates to a study for tax breaks or incentives for creating small businesses, a small business incentive zone to reduce storefront vacancies. The agency's response that a lot of this was handled within this City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. I don't think that quite addresses this is a little bit more specific. So I would say let's keep this on here and work with Zach on a way to make that a little clearer in terms of why that's distinct from what was within economic opportunity.
the nice thing is it also says resubmit requests, so that means that that we don't have to throw them out. I agree.
And Brandon Thompson had written us both, you saw that email about the desire to have something that looked at what kinds of businesses our community needs, not just businesses, and feels that that's never really addressed. Obviously not an SBS issue necessarily, but I'm just wondering, is there any way we can, I thought it was a very good point that he raised, and I just wondered if there's anywhere we could.
We could do that here and
Identify.
ask SBS to do that. SBS and DCP should do an analysis of types of retail in each district, yeah.
Yeah, why not, right? Because, his point was well taken, like, there is no grocery in Tribeca, stuff like that. Anyway, whatever. That, I thought he raised a good point, so great, thanks. That
Okay,
was
so we'll
that.
keep this one and
Yeah.
we'll work to massage the language a little bit so that we don't get that response back. Okay, the next was whether the staff, individual community boards with a land use consultant to work directly with the community board staff and members. DCP has pushed back on that, basically saying that it's not
We get
their
that, they
agency.
don't want to do it.
I mean, I kind of maybe take the agency's point. Is there, and again, this could be a question for Zach.
DCAS.
Yeah, I was wondering, what's the right agency then?
Yeah. no, look at it, these-
Where do we get our staffing from? So I said, keep that. Let's just work with Zach to figure out the right agency. Okay,
Right.
the third one was funding for lead paint testing and remediation of all city-owned properties.
Excuse me, Patrick, there's something called SCORE.
Sorry?
There's something called SCORE, which is retired executives. And you might be able to tap into that for land use.
Well, that's,
Okay.
is that a city agency?
I don't know if it's city or federal.
Okay, we'll ask Zach about that. Alice, I think you're right,
Yeah, that's,
these last two might be more appropriate through economic development. I'm not sure why they're on here.
I don't either. I thought they were in DEP and I thought they came under our committee, environmental.
Well, thank you for
protection.
volunteering.
I don't know. I mean, we should find out, let's ask Zach to
Okay.
make sure that
Uh,
that's where they
I-
belong.
They were supposed to be in EPC, so I think that's true. I think DCAS is the right one, that we should ask them to. What we're asking for is testing, and they're like, oh, as far as we know, we don't care, we don't know. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So that leaves us, that was easy enough, with any new ones that
Yeah,
we think.
new ones. I can't believe we only have two.
the new one would be asking for a analysis by community board of types of retail.
But that's,
I think that's a new one. Shouldn't be the community board, DCP should be able to fund those studies.
Yeah, I agree, like, almost like they're asking the community for their input on this Manhattan plan, but like they're being paid as professionals to come up with planning plans. And we're not planners. I mean, it's nice what they're doing, I'm not trying
They
to.
should do an analysis.
Yeah.
And it
I'd like to-
it really shouldn't be that hard. I mean, if each community district has at least one business improvement district, they can tap into that as a resource, not exclusively.
Yeah,
They'll
right.
just-
As a part. For data.
Yeah, exactly.
They should be able to do that.
yeah, no, I thought that was a great idea on his part. And, this is for DOT and maybe this, I heard a lot of, well, I think this is,
You
say that.
You want to say the resiliency word or something?
no. I was looking for transportation is.
Okay, the T word.
Yeah, it wasn't the L word.
Okay.
Let's fund another
How about a-
facility study that will never.
How about a study of the economic impact of tourism in our area?
Love that.
Good.
Because
You
that,
feel it.
that
You feel it.
impacts retail and everything else.
Right. I'm taking over.
Because the only information we have currently on that is from the
Downtown
downtown
Alliance.
alliance, but it
Right.
doesn't reflect anything north of Chambers Street.
Right.
Right.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
What a great meeting this was. I don't want to kind of put a bookend to it, but.
okay.
I mean, the night is young, right? We're at work to do, we're at work to do tomorrow. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Thank you.
Who's got trivia night together?
Trivia night, nice, dude.
Uh,
Oh, I'm,
social. yeah.
that corner, you're one, oh, this is great.
All right, so
Okay,
say
Fair
goodnight.
game, so-
Didn't
okay.
we used to have, didn't we used to have requests about the privately owned, the POPs, survey of the POPs and whether they're being enforced? Didn't we used to have that as one of our
We
requests?
could, that was done by the controller's office. It's certainly something that we could ask DCP based on the letter that we're
Yeah, not,
supposedly
yeah,
getting.
about the other one that's
Yeah.
being destroyed, whatever that one was.
So let's add on here, thank you, Richard, for an updated study from DCP of our POPs.
Because of what happened with this one on Water Street.
And then
After.
I have two other things for DCP. Create a reporting mechanism for any contracts that are done through EDC that affects public realm. This is no reporting mechanism. i.e. spaces that are supposed to be open to the public that they're not, to have them be zoned as POPs in some way.
Okay.
I don't know if this is parks. I don't know if the POPs are parks, but anyway, I think it should be on there somewhere.
No, they are, that would be land use because they're benefits from zoning,
Yep.
everything.
Yeah, right.
POPs are
That's
city
right.
planning.
That makes
POPs are
sense, right.
squarely in
Yeah,
city
and they're
planning
overseas.
jurisdiction.
Great.
Yep. And so are the EDC land use deals. they came out of deals from city planning and permits, so, yeah.
What about an analysis of air rights, potential air rights transfers?
So actually, still Meta's thunder, but Meta had a similar idea we were talking about at the beginning of the meeting that I was encouraging that it's talked to Zach about as a study that could be done by the New York City fellow,
Oh, that's a good one.
since it's so granular to our district. And it's-
You know,
Based on
especially
local
along the
data.
piers and
That's
stuff.
a good idea.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, and if anybody else has ideas for the fellow, please let us know by Wednesday, I think, because we have to submit on Thursday. I have one that I want to do, which kind of tags to what we're doing, to have a lot of the data already. How many market rate housing, how much affordable housing, and put that upside with retail vacancies. The charting retail vacancies and school seats.
Do we know a home ownership versus rental?
How many tasks can this person handle?
Yeah.
Well, that, I mean, really,
You write up different projects and they choose what project.
can they
they
do
want.
two, and how long is the term?
No.
Oh, no, it's just one
Yeah.
part.
You get two people and each does one project.
Okay, cool. That's so nice. What a lovely thing.
Okay,
I think.
All right, everyone.
all right, we're done?
We're
You
good.
done?
Okay, thank you guys very much.
Everybody?
Thank you.